Over the last 10 years we've been breeding dubia roaches and experimenting with different methods to see what works better and what doesn't. In this video we're going to teach you everything that we've learnt and more in this how to breed dubia roaches video.
We're going to start off with the setup of the enclosure itself. The size of the enclosure matters massively. It has to be big enough so that the females can actually get away and hide out in a corner just after they've given birth, just to help them recover slightly. If there is some bullying or animosity within the enclosure, you want to have enough space for the adults to actually get out, but it can't be too big where the adults can't find each other to actually be able to mate. It's a fine balance. This is the enclosure I used for 200 adults, whereas this is the enclosure I'm now building here today, just solely because we're upping our production so that we can offer a load of dubia roaches to our local reptile rescue.
That's Cheshire Reptile Rescue, and we're always down there and we're always putting videos out about that place. So if you want to see that, make sure you do hit that subscribe button.
The darker the enclosure that you can get, the better. Now this is solely because it makes them feel a lot more comfortable, a lot more secure. If the females feel more secure, they're going to produce more babies and feel safer to produce more babies. And that actually works. You can provide darkness within all the nooks and crannies that you do put inside the enclosure, but it's better to make the ambient light inside the enclosure pitch black or as close to as you can possibly make, just to make them feel more comfortable. This one that we used with 200 adults, it isn't that dark inside. And we noticed that to be a problem. It's something we didn't actually expect until I put my phone on record, stuck it inside the actual enclosure, and then I closed it down and I realised, oh my god, there's an absolute ton of light still getting in there. That's why we've changed over to this pitch black dark one. No light passes through into this one, except we will have a little bit of light in there when we do add the vents.
Now a little bit of light isn't the end of the world. It's actually quite beneficial because it teaches the dubia roaches a day and nighttime routine. When they should sleep through the day, it recharges their energy so they can put all that energy back into the actual breeding part of this project.
We need to have a lot of vents into the side of this enclosure. The way we make the vents is we've got this big hole saw and we drop in 4 holes in the top corner, 2 on each side. We've got some perfectly shaped vents to go into these holes. We're going to cover them with a piece of material just to stop any of the babies coming out. Ideally, we'd like to go for a piece of fly screen mesh and hot glue it to those outsides. But we have run out. We've just ordered some, so we'll fit the fly screen mesh a little later through the video. That just allows for extremely good air ventilation. A nice clean air within the enclosure massively helps the production side of your enclosure. You think one female can lay a ton of babies 9 times in her lifestyle. There's going to be a lot of air that needs to be breathed inside this enclosure. If it's not clean air, your animals are going to suffer. The female will only lay 9 times in her life. That includes the times that she doesn't lay and reabsorbs her eggs. A female will just reabsorb the eggs into her body and use that nutrition to benefit herself if she feels that that environment is not adequate enough to grow those babies. Whether there not be enough food, whether there not be enough hiding spaces, whether there not be a good air or moisture for the babies, she'll just reabsorb them. And that counts as one of those 9 times. We stick those vents quite high up just to allow good circulation throughout the whole enclosure. And the 10 screen mesh, the dubia roaches can actually chew through it, so we just want to keep that aspect a little bit safer. Keep that in mind. We have to check there's no leaks inside your new enclosure. That's one that I failed with. Through the manufacture process of some of these tubs, there can be little holes in the bottom of them just through general manufacturing purposes. Now I built an enclosure ages ago and it actually leaked dubia roaches. So the way we test this, we just fill some water inside the actual container and check if there is any leaks. If there is a leak, just cover it with tape or fill it with silicone or hot glue or anything like that, and it works absolutely perfect.
Make sure the container that you choose to use is smooth on the inside. Dubia roaches can't climb up a smooth surface and that just stops them from escaping. These babies can become escape artists.
Now for the heating of this enclosure, I'm going to give you 2 tips that both worked really well for me. One of them's a free tip and the other one costs you a little bit of money. You can add a heat mat into one side of this enclosure. It is important to have heat with these dubia roaches, not just heat but a thermal regulation of heat. One side of the enclosure quite hot and the other side quite cool. This is because the animals do need to thermal regulate. If they get a bit warm, they can go over to the cold side of the enclosure. If they get a bit cold, they can come over to the warm side of the enclosure. Not just benefits the animals, but the unborn dubia roaches too. The females need to thermal regulate their internal temperature to get the best incubation temperature inside her body for these dubia roaches.
And that's because dubia roaches are quite fascinating. They actually incubate eggs inside their body. When those eggs hatch, they then give birth to live babies. So randomly one day you might walk into your dubia colony, have a little look inside, and you'll see a dubia roach with a steak sticking out of their butt. That's just them thermal regulating the temperature of those eggs. It's a little bit warm inside the female's body, so she pokes them out of her butt just to air them out, get a bit of air around them, cool them down ever so slightly before she reabsorbs them back in and continues the thermal regulation of those eggs.
I find 87 degrees Fahrenheit as a hotspot works absolutely perfect. We achieve this with a heat mat and a pulse proportional thermostat. But the free option is, have you got an animal that's got a big hotspot within its enclosure? The heat will rise and it will come through the top of the enclosure. You can use that kinetic heat on top of the enclosure as a hotspot. I do it with my baby's enclosure.
On the inside of the enclosure, again keeping in mind you've got a hot side and a cold side. The cold side is where you're going to be placing your food and your water, solely because you don't want too much humidity to come off the water. You don't want it to evaporate too quickly. You don't want any wet food that you put in there to dehydrate really quickly, and it's just better to keep it on the cool side. You want to stack up egg crate. Now if you are only doing a small colony of breeding dubia roaches, you can use stuff like the McDonald's cup holders, toilet roll inserts, any piece of cardboard that an animal can easily hide in and scurry and find a really dark spot inside there is going to be absolutely perfect. Because we are doing it on a large scale, we've got loads of these egg crates. We're going to stack them up vertically so these animals can thermal regulate side to side and up and down. The cold side, we've got dry food. We'll get onto the food next. We've also got water crystals for a moisture source, because the biggest killer of dubia roaches is dehydration. Keeping them hydrated is massively important, if not the most important thing you're going to learn today. For wet food, again, we've got these little tubs. These tubs are just normal deli cups that we've cut a big slot into one side so the animals can easily get in and out of the actual food. We don't want one animal that's a little bit weak to struggle to get into this, so it's better to do it this way. The food that you provide to your dubia roaches is massively important, solely because that food, the vitamins and minerals that you put into your live food, is then going to transfer into your reptile or to yourself, whoever is actually consuming these dubia roaches. So we need to get this spot on. You can't use dog food anymore. The new scientific regulations have found out that too much animal protein within the food is actually giving too much animal protein to your reptiles. It causes gout within bearded dragons extremely commonly. So stay away from dog food. Cat food is half acceptable. The best food you can possibly use is rabbit food. Believe it or not, just cheap and cheerful rabbit food from your local supermarket. There's two ways you can do this. You can add it into a roach chow mix, which, if you want to know how to make roach chow, it's the cheapest way you can feed your dubia roaches a dry food. I'll leave a card directly above right now. Or you can use straight rabbit food. Now I like to use this in twofold. One, just the normal rabbit food pellets just dropped straight into a deli cup. And number two, if you've got a lot of babies within that colony, I like to grind up some and mix up that ground up rabbit food in with the actual dry rabbit food. This is another reason why it needs to be on the cold side. If you have a humidity spike in there, it can affect the rabbit food. So just keep it nice and straight. It's full of jam-packed nutrition that's absolutely perfect for a rabbit. A rabbit's diet is exactly the same as a dubia roach's diet in the wild. It's always wise to feed them a natural food source as well, sort of your salad-based stuff. Try and stay away from the foods that you need to stay away from with a bearded dragon. Stuff like spinach, orange, you don't really want to be adding that too much into your dubia roaches, solely because it can affect your reptile in the long term. I tend to use scrap foods as a wet food. So if I'm eating an apple, I will get the apple core and just drop that straight into the dubia roach colony. They will devour it. On Halloween, when we were carving out a pumpkin, I chucked all the pumpkin in there. We do end up with a load of seeds kicking around, but the pumpkin, they absolutely loved it. Just random bits of scrap food that's a wet, highly nutritious food. Drop it in with them and I'm sure they'll love it. In the next tub we have water crystals. These are just an additional moisture source. The moisture given off by the fresh fruit and vegetables is enough moisture for them, but having that additional moisture source just aids the females to feel confident enough that their babies can live in that surroundings, so it does breed and give you more production. That goes for the same with food as well. If there's not enough food in that area for your dubia roaches, the females just won't lay the eggs because that environment is not stable enough to secure a healthy population of babies. Provide loads of food and loads of moisture, you're going to have a overpopulated dubia roach breeding colony. So up to now we've covered the enclosure and all the hints and tips that we've learned over the past 10 years to help benefit you guys. We've also covered the food and the diet and the best possible practice that you can do at a valued cost. So are you subscribed yet? Let's move over to the actual dubia roaches. When you're first setting up your dubia roach colony, you instantly want to go straight in for adults because you think, I know, they'll breed quicker, when that's actually incorrect. You think if you put an adult one in there, you go out and physically buy adults to go into your dubia roach colony, how many times has that adult already bred before you've got it? You don't know this. You don't know whether they've tried to breed and reabsorbed. The best possible practice is to buy multiple different sizes. Let me explain. Buy large ones because they're only one molt away from actually becoming fresh adults. Fresh adults means you're going to get 9 different clutches per female that goes into that enclosure. But then you can't just buy large, because by the time they get to breeding age and they've all bred 9 times, they're going to die off and you're going to end up with dubia roaches that are all smalls and none of them are still actually breeding. So if you buy yourself a bulk amount of large dubia roaches and then buy yourself some mediums and then buy yourself some smalls, by the time the large ones are starting to die off because of old age, your medium ones are already at breeding age, so you're going to constantly have a big cycle. The best place I've found here in the UK to actually buy dubia roaches is Buzzard Reptile. They do them the cheapest possible price for the most amount, and they always chuck in a few extra just in case there is any dead on arrival ones, just due to shipping purposes. I'll leave them linked in the description down below. The only downside to buying large instead of adult dubia roaches, adult dubia roaches are so easy to tell the gender, and the gender is very important when it comes around to breeding dubia roaches. You want 5 females to 1 male. That gives the perfect ratio. If you have too many females, they will bully the male. If you have too many males, the males will fight and they won't actually breed. This is a female compared to this is a male. Yes, the males do have long wings going all the way down their body, but they can't really fly. They're more used for gliding. You can throw one across the room and it'll glide the entire length of the room. Now you know the best way to breed dubia roaches. Subscribe and thank me later. Peace out.